and arrested doing it, and he takes a photograph of it, and a second later, so I'm holding the shadow like in front of the cop, like the cop's like pissed off, and he caught him at the right moment, and someone behind me throws a fucking garbage can lid at the cop. Now my hands are on the shadow. The cop goes, "Take him!" Points to me and gets me arrested. As if I threw the fucking garbage can lid. How can I do that by holding the fucking shadow? Next thing I know, I'm in fucking jail. It's crazy for 24 hours.
Alright.
But that's par for the course, you know, you get that's part of the fun. But that was a great shot, that was an excellent shot.
That's funny. Alright, I gotta go do this.
Alright,
I'll see you. Thanks, Chris.
You should check out the people always saw it sometime, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back. Alright. So I think you're good to go.
Am I sitting in the right spot?
Well,
It was waves of cops coming from all over the fucking city. Badges covered.
Yeah.
No command post, no one in charge. There was just a free fall. They were just coming. Anyone that moved, you didn't have to be a demonstrator against the government. There was a guy just walking out for the evening on St. Mark's Place. They just grabbed and beat the crap out of him. His finger got amputated. They broke it. There was a waitress in the 7A cafe. The cops come running in and they start beating the crap out of her with the clubs. She's a fucking waitress. She's working. She's not demonstrating on Avenue A. The manager, a female manager, goes running up to the cops. "What are you doing? She's working here." They beat the crap out of her. They drag her by a hair out of fucking 7A, the cafe. Why? What the fuck? They were rabid. They were a rabid, marauding pack of wild animals. It was insane. The homeless had to deal with the cops basically. Which look, you know, you can come into the park, you know, late at night and just sleep there, and then just get out by the morning. That was the deal with the cops, you know, and so they didn't really want to fight the cops. They wanted a place to fucking sleep. Some old, very old white homeless lady had a little shut cart, and she was trying to go to the park. She had no idea what the fuck was going on with this riot bullshit. She was trying to go to the park. It's midnight. She's trying to go to the park. So she goes, the cops beat the crap out of her with clubs. I couldn't believe my eyes. A little old lady was all like hunched over, and she's like maybe 75, 80 years old, and bang, bang, bang. How could you do that and go home to your fucking family? "Hi, Daddy, what'd you do today at work?" "Well, I beat the piss out of an old homeless lady and stomped her into the ground." What kind of a psycho can do that and detach and disconnect and go home to his kids? How can he do that? But they did. The demographics were a little different back in the 80s than they are now because a lot of people have been pushed out. But in the 80s, you still had a lot of very poor people here. They didn't have a fucking summer home in the Hamptons to go to. They didn't have a vacation cabin up north. You know, Tompkins Park was their backyard where it's about 10 degrees cooler in the park on a hot summer night. You know, and at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, maybe you want to hang out, maybe you want to talk to your friends, maybe you want to hang out with your neighbors, and maybe just chill out. You're not committing crimes, you're not like doing something bad. Why should the park be closed? And so you had those kind of people who did not want their park closed with an arbitrary illegal curfew, and others who didn't want a police army on their fucking block, and others who were against the gentrification of the neighborhood, which they saw the police as enforcing and facilitating. And you also had the anarchists who didn't like authority or rules or cops in general, and you had the squatters who were kind of defending their turf from the yuppie invasion, and people with, let's say, combinations of all of those factors. So you had kind of you know, either some or all of those factors. But it wasn't really, there was no leadership. There was no leader or somebody dictating what was going to happen that night. It was all very spontaneous. It was a spontaneous public response to a collective public response to a police invasion. There's lots of examples where certain moneyed elements, real estate interests and banking interests, will, let's say, contribute to the decline of a neighborhood, so that after a certain amount of time passes, they can come in and buy everything for pennies on the dollar. That's a scam. So you get like really fucked up ghettoized neighborhoods. The people that usually turn it around are underground countercultural types, like artists, musicians, writers, the creative element. It was like that in the West Village. Not really so desirable, but it was like kind of bohemian thing, and people just like, you know, countercultural people there. Now suddenly when they were there, they made it cool and they made it desirable. So those same kinds of people came to Soho, and they made that area cool. And then next thing you got Tribeca, very high priced real estate. Those same kind of people made the Lower East Side desirable by coming in here in the 60s. 50s and 60s and 70s. So when the city was on the verge, I'm kind of just giving you a really quick brush, but by the early 80s, the Lower East Side had suffered from a combination of white flight to the suburbs after during the 60s and 70s after World War II, the baby boomer families, starting families out there, and a reduction in the tax rolls as a result, and then also a deliberate plan by the feds and you have to look up something called the Kerner Commission, Kerner. It's basically, I'm trying to like put this in a quick nutshell. As the '60s progressed, there was a lot of political organizing in inner city neighborhoods. And you had Black Panthers, you had the Young Lords, you had people organizing politically against the Vietnam War. Yeah. The Kerner Commission was something that was designed to find out the causes and what to do about it. One of the recommendations, or a couple of recommendations they came up with, was something called spatial deconcentration. And what was the other one? Spatial deconcentration was a big one. They decided to break up the inner cities so that there'd be no political organizing. What happened on the Lower East Side and in Harlem and in parts of Brooklyn was the city withheld essential services. So garbage wasn't picked up. The police didn't patrol. They didn't fix the roads. Then they said then they coupled that with something called redlining. And with redlining, basically banks refused to make loans. If you had a small, let's say a mother and a husband and wife owned a little building on the Lower East Side, and they lived in the building, and they kept the building clean, and they rented out the apartments above, and they tried to get a loan from the bank to, let's say, do repairs on their building. The banks wouldn't make them any more loans. The insurance company stopped insuring the building. So what happened was a lot of people either abandoned their buildings completely, or some unscrupulous owners would burn the buildings down and collect what little insurance they could get. The end result was, on top of that, the coup de grace was like this huge wave of heroin coming into the Lower East Side in New York City, all coincidentally happening about the same time. So you had, the result was burnt out, bombed out neighborhoods looking like London after the Blitz. So by the early 80s, they started turning it around. Suddenly, a lot more yuppies were coming into the neighborhood. They suddenly found it desirable to start opening little galleries, then little like cafes. And next thing you know, money was suddenly becoming available by banks. Banks started lending money against people. There was a homesteading program by the city to allow people to get abandoned city-owned buildings for like $1 if they would rehab the buildings themselves. Then the city quickly canceled that as the price of real estate started going up a little bit and becoming more desirable. Then a whole squatting movement began, where squatters were taking over city-owned buildings so that they can create immediate housing without having to go through poverty pimp housing groups. Just to explain what that term means, you take a group run by some Hispanic gang leader, and the city will throw a bunch of money at him, and he'll claim to be XYZ housing group, and they'll let him control X number of buildings, but he's not really housing anybody. But the city can say, well, we gave it to this XYZ Hispanic housing group, so we are trying to help the local people, but it's bullshit. It's a guy just lining his own pockets. But the squatters would go in and take the buildings immediately at no cost to taxpayers and fix them up. So you had a lot of factors kind of happening at the same time. You had rising gentrification, you had increased yuppie presence in the neighborhood, displacing long-time residents and businesses, and you had, what was the first one I said again? I'm sorry. Well, you had rising real estate prices, you had displacement of local businesses and long-term residents by yuppie intruders, gentrification, and you also had a big squatter movement. The cops were suddenly being used, or let's say being called upon, to kind of sanitize the neighborhood, to kind of make the neighborhood more investor friendly, more investor safe for people that want to come in and start buying up buildings, and different elements in the neighborhood. Oh, you also had a huge growing homeless problem. That's another factor. And the costs are being used to, one, kind of push away the homeless people from sight, trying to clamp down on demonstrations, to make the neighborhood like yuppie and investor friendly, so they wouldn't be afraid to come here and buy buildings and open up little yuppie businesses.
How did the neighborhood kind of like I know it was like, you could say like the gentrification kind of began like the mid '80s, or like how did it look like it was in the middle of being gentrified, or was it still kind of like gritty kind of?
It was still gritty. It was still rough, and that appealed to the people that with a lot of money.
The artists.
Well, the artists were here because it was affordable. They were here in the '50s and '60s and '70s because it was affordable. It was a place to like do their thing, have a counterculture, and not, you could still have rented an apartment for like $300 or $400 a month. Yeah. But the yuppies or the gentrified. Well, let's. You have Euro trash, people from Europe with a lot of fucking money, and they find this American culture really cool and edgy and desirable. They have a lot of money, but they don't want to hang out with their own people, their own kind, uptown or elsewhere, because it's boring. They come to anywhere, they go slumming. So there was a restaurant on 3rd Street, I think it was called Sylvia's. Everything around it was dangerous, man, drug dealing, crazy shit. But they would stretch limos to go to this little restaurant on 3rd and B. Like they were just going slumming. It was cool. They do this shit all the time, but their very presence here destroys the thing that they're trying to be a part of.
Yeah.
And they don't get it, and that's what started happening. But anyway, all of these forces were in place as the police were being called upon to kind of confront those forces, and it all kind of came to a head in the summer of 1988.
Right.
And if you want to ask your next question, I know I'm giving you a long-winded answer.
No.
I hope you can edit and get out the little pieces you can use from this.
I love it. How did the shadow start exactly? Like, how did that,
Okay, so I had to give you the background to get you to the riot, because the riot is what leads to the shadow. So so the riot itself, well, the riot was kind of spontaneous. It was not really planned. But here's my memory of what happened. And memory can be fuzzy because it is like 24 and a half years ago.
Yeah.
On the night of July 30th, 1988, I just happened to be in Tompkins Park. People were hanging out in the park, and there were these two huge trees. I don't know if you know those two huge trees where the benches, that little arch, when we have the concerts. Yeah. And there used to be a bench between those two trees, and people were just sitting there on that bench and also the circular benches, and just some people were just like playing quietly on guitar, and one guy had little bongos. It was really quiet. Yeah. And Jerry the Peddler came to the park. He'd just been with, I don't know if you ever heard of Morton Downey. Morton Downey had this TV show on Channel 9. A real right-wing reactionary scumbag. But secretly he was one of us. His shtick was playing this, oh, fuck you, you asshole, and smoking his cigarettes, and he'd be very confrontational in your face. And he got ratings because of it. But secretly he's smoking pot with Jerry the Peddler, and like, yeah, you guys are cool, I like the Squatters, But on TV he had to make us look bad, because that was his job, It was like really weird. So he and Jerry had been at Caroline's Comedy Club having a little debate, like two opposite sides of the spectrum. So Morton Downey gave Jerry a bunch of money to buy some beer. So Jerry brings a whole bunch of beer to the park, and everyone's drinking beer now. So the cops come into the park and they say it's a midnight curfew, you gotta get out of the park. But there's no curfew. They just made it up. So people were like, fuck you, we're not gonna, and the next thing you know, a whole bunch of cops come in and they start like swinging clubs and beating the piss out of people. So people backed off, we all withdrew. It was kind of an unspoken thing. We knew it and they knew it, that next Saturday we were going to have a fucking rumble. No one said it, no one declared it. It was just, we're building up our forces, they're building up their forces. Over the next 7 days, this sounds like a movie, this is like West Side Story with the Jets and the Sharks, tonight, we're going to have some fun tonight, you can see both sides, the Hispanics singing their song, the white guys are singing their song, and they're all getting ready for the rumble. It was like that, it was crazy, but true. So over the next several days, the park is surrounded by fucking police vehicles. They put a huge police communications trailer in the center of the park. They have cops on horseback doing maneuvers. They have cops on foot doing maneuvers with clubs. They were showing us, we're coming to kick your fucking ass next Saturday. It wasn't like, well, we'll just see if anything happens, we'll be ready to respond to it. It was like, we're doing maneuvers in front of you, we're provoking you to fucking stop us, assholes. Our gang versus your gang. Now none of our people were really building up our forces, we were just spreading the word. That was our way of building up our forces. Their way of building up the forces was to have their army and doing maneuvers, like flaunting themselves in front of us to provoke us. And our method of building a force was to spread the word that Saturday we're going to demonstrate against the curfew. None of us were going to demonstrate and kick cops' asses. We didn't have weapons. They had the weapons. They had the clubs. We were just going to not let them, or make it very hard for them to enforce a midnight curfew. So, and the whole curfew thing started by a secret meeting with some members of Community Board 3 with the local police captain, Captain McNamara, Gerald McNamara. And the Shadow got a secret copy of the list of people that were at the meeting, which we published in the Shadow. At this meeting, they were trying to get local community members to agree to a midnight curfew, but they didn't agree to the curfew. It was not in the law. It wasn't part of the Parks Department's code. Someone just made it up. They painted the words "Park closes at midnight" on each entrance to the park. You can't just make up a fucking curfew. And the cops are, well, we're going to enforce that curfew. You can't enforce a curfew. Someone put it on the fucking painting on the goddamn floor. But that's what they were trying to do. So, of course, comes midnight, August 6, 1988, 7 days later, Saturday night, and people are demonstrating inside the park before the curfew, before the alleged curfew. And people are marching in circles, and they're drumming, they're making lots of noise. And, granted, some people are throwing a mateys around, and boom, 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 but no one threw anything at the cops, So, on the dot, people should have stayed inside the park, in my opinion, to force the cops to get us out of the park. But people marched out of the park to have the demonstration and confrontation with the cops on Avenue A. Come midnight, the cops block the park. Some people try to run into the park at midnight to kind of make their point, and all hell broke loose. So for the next let's say 6 hours, we had a fucking riot.
Yeah.
And it was waves of cops coming from all over the fucking city, badges covered.
Yeah.
No command post, no one in charge. There was just a free fall. They were just coming. Anyone that moved, you didn't have to be a demonstrator against the government. There was a guy just walking out for the evening on St. Mark's Place. They just grabbed and beat the crap out of him. His finger got amputated. They broke him. There was a waitress in the 7A cafe. The cops come running in and they start beating the crap out of her with the clubs. She's a fucking waitress. She's working. She's not demonstrating on Avenue A. The manager, a female manager, goes running up to the cops. What are you doing? She's working here. They beat the crap out of her. They drag her by a hair out of fucking 7A, the cafe. Why? What the fuck? They were rabid. They were a rabid, marauding pack of wild animals. It was insane. And granted, yeah, a lot of times people were kind of like yelling at them or provoking them, and some people were throwing bottles at them, but they started it. My favorite 2 episodes of that were, at one point, the cops ran up Avenue A toward like between 4th and 5th Streets, and there's this huge apartment complex. It's all elderly white people mostly. Like it's not like a little inner city ghetto project. It's like a white middle class project. And because of the street lights right above them, they were blinded and couldn't see what was above them. And people from the projects were throwing bottles at the cops. And the cops were dodging all these bottles. And they couldn't see what was doing it because the white light was blinding them from the street lights. That was one. But the other one that was really funny was this police helicopter comes. At some point, one of the fucking ranking officers got the cops to line up in a row. The helicopter comes and blows all their hats off. And now they were like running, scrambling for their fucking hats. And everyone's like, ah! Just laughing hysterically at them. That was a crazy fucking night. But it was big waves of cops coming at us, and then we come at them. It was like just waves all night, in and out. But it was really fucking scary, man. They were beating the crap out of everybody. One cop was coming at me so fucking fast. And he swung his club, and he expected the club to contact my head. But I got out of the way, and he fell down. And I just heard, and the club. If I hadn't ducked it, I would have been dead. He was going to hit me with all the force he could possibly hit me with. He was so sure he was going to make contact, he didn't even make any he didn't arrange for his weight to be different. He just expected his weight to land on me. And when I ducked that way, he just fell right fucking down. I would have been dead, man. It was really a crazy night. So anyway, how did the shadow come about? I've told the story before, but I'll tell you again. In the days following the riot, the mainstream media was sympathetic to us, the people in the neighborhood that had been attacked by the cops. The cops out of control, cops rioting. They called them cops rioting. They emphasized the covered up badge, the little black thing over the numbers. The mainstream media was on our side, which I was really surprised to see. Even Mayor Koch was like, "I demand investigation," and it was just, it was really because my friend Paul Garron was very smart. He filmed himself being beaten up by the fucking cops. He filmed a lot of the violence and the badge being covered. So he had like video evidence. And at one point, he's on top of a van at the corner of 6th and A, and the cops just see him while they're rushing at people, beating him up, and they see him, they start whacking at him, and they get him down off the van, and they beat the crap out of him. But somehow he cradled his camera, he saved his film. He immediately gave it to all the media for free. So every time you saw a news report about Tompkins Square Park riot, his footage would come up immediately. Very smart guy, he got it out there. Clayton tried to hold his and get money for it, but Paul put his out there immediately, made a whole bunch of copies, and said, "Here, have it for free." And that was everywhere. So the cops couldn't deny it happened. It was right there. So in about a week or less, suddenly the tone of the media started changing and shifting. Now, we started the riot. We provoked those cops. We're white kids from Scarsdale. These are their words. These are their words. Ben, what the fuck was that asshole's name? The police commissioner, Ben, the big fat asshole. He used to be head of the charge of Department of Corrections. He's in the shadow. Anyway, that was his description, and the media was parroting everything he said. Now suddenly, the cops were the victims. We were the provocateurs. We started it. And I realized at that point, I said to myself, we need to have an underground newspaper in our neighborhood like that used to exist in the 1960s and 70s. In the 60s and 70s, we had 2 underground newspapers. One was called The Rat, which is the radical paper, and the other was the East Village Other, which is kind of like the mainstream. They had their radical side, the East Village Other, but the Rat was much more radical. The Rat was much more militant. The Rat would publish illustrations how to use kung fu to fight when the cop is trying to attack you, how you can fight back, how to shoplift, you know, how to jump a turnstile. That was good shit. I was like, yeah, I love the Rat, man. That was the Rat. But the East Village Other was radical in its own way, but the Rat was the more radical. So we patterned the Shadow after the Rat. And we decided we would use a tabloid format like the New York Compost or the Daily Snooze. We would use, you know, their format with big blaring headlines, but we would tell the truth from the anarchist point of view, but the truth with investigative journalism, and we would take the time to give you a report that would detail every single thing that was happening. Little did we know what was going to happen over the next 3 or 4 years, how intense the battles were going to be. We did not know. So as it turned out, we just kind of came about at the right place at the right time, not even realizing. We just wanted to have an alternative voice to the mainstream media, which was lying about us, distorting the news, and not even reporting or underreporting or misreporting what was actually happening. Because they can really form public opinion by the way they report, or not report, or misreport. And we figured we had to counter that. So that's a long answer to your question.
With the demonstrations, would you say, was it kind of like, what's the word for it? Was it kind of like started, at least for the riot, like people who were demonstrating at the time? Was it kind of like they're broken up into different groups and each kind of group had their own kind of like leader who was like saying their own thing? Or was it kind of like sporadic?
You want the riot, the night of the riot?
Yeah, or just like the people who were demonstrating the gentrification and like the curfew. And
it was just, what it really was just a group of people, some of whom knew each other, others who did not know each other, most of whom really did not want a police army on their fucking street, and they didn't want a fucking curfew in the park. Because think about this, your average person, the demographics were a little different back in the 80s than they are now, because a lot of people have been pushed out. But in the 80s, you still had a lot of very poor people here. They didn't have a fucking summer home in the Hamptons to go to. They didn't have a vacation cabin up north. You know, Tompkins Park was their backyard, where it's about 10 degrees cooler in the park on a hot summer night. You know, and at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, maybe you want to hang out. Maybe you want to talk to your friends. Maybe you want to hang out with your neighbors and maybe just chill out. You're not committing crimes. You're not like doing something bad. Why should the park be closed? And so you had those kind of people who did not want their park closed with an arbitrary illegal curfew, and others who didn't want a police army on their fucking block, and others who were against the gentrification of the neighborhood, which they saw the police as enforcing and facilitating. And you also had the anarchists who didn't like authority or rules or cops in general, and you had the squatters who were kind of defending their turf from the yuppie invasion, and people with, let's say, combinations of all of those factors. So you had kind of you know, either some or all of those factors. But it wasn't really, there was no leadership. There was no leader or somebody dictating what was going to happen that night. It was all very spontaneous. It was a spontaneous public response to a collective public response to a police invasion, basically.
But after the
am I talking too much?
No. Keep going. After the riot, I mean, before the riot, first of all, was there any kind of police, like, after the riot, of course, there's the issue of police brutality coming up. Before the riot, you would say it was more about, like, the gentrification as a whole and the curfew, would you say?
Before the riot, the real issues were, like, people were being, there's a lot of unscrupulous real estate speculators. They would buy buildings and flip them, and flip them, and flip them, because the market was on the way up. So you could buy here, flip, while the market's still going up, buy, flip, while the market's going up. And what you had was really no long-term owners who gave a shit about the buildings. So the buildings weren't being maintained. A lot of people being pushed out. They're using a lot of drug gangs to push people out of their apartments, to scare people out of their buildings, so they can renovate them and then put yuppies in and get higher rents.
I think that's when my dad got arrested. He said he got arrested when what was the story? He said him and a bunch of other people, I forget who it was.
I remember him getting busted, but
I forget what year it was, but he went into this guy was some like a landlord. He was holding out this building, nobody was living in it, and because he was waiting for the real estate to go up or something like that. And then meanwhile there's 100 homeless people in the park who like don't have homes. And apparently he busted into I think it might have been with the father at St. Bridges, and he went into the building and just started protesting.
Your dad got busted. That was the school building. I believe that was the ABC Community Center. We had this old, there's an abandoned school building on East 4th Street. The building's still there now, between B and C. I think that's what you're talking about, because that's when the Father George was involved. Although there might have been others, because Father George was a very active priest, very fucking amazing guy. God damn. Because you don't really trust the Catholic Church too much to be caring about the neighborhood, but he cared. He's amazing. If that's the one you're talking about, that particular instance, there's an abandoned school building. It had been abandoned for the longest time, for decades. It had been broken into by junkies who would shoot up and die in there.
Yeah.
It was crazy. The city was always, they're always pulling dead bodies out of there. And it was really a nasty place. And the squatters got this idea, Mike Schenker in particular, really a brilliant guy, got the idea to turn this into a community center for the neighborhood. As soon as we occupied the building to do that, next thing you know, the city says, "Oh, we got plans for that building. You're interfering. You got to get out." Well, when your plans for the past 2 fucking decades? Only when the squatters decided to do something, and the neighborhood, they got neighborhood people involved too. It wasn't just squatters. Only when the neighborhood, the neighbors, the community started doing something with the building did the city say they wanted it. I don't remember your dad being busted there though, but it's possible. The cops raided the place a couple of times, but we just kept going right back in again. And finally, it was a fucking army of cops, and they totally blocked off the fucking. It was crazy. Paul Guerin filmed it actually, and after like a whole army coming, then they got the place totally evacuated. Now it's AIDS housing, but what is AIDS housing? You're basically making a hospice for people dying of AIDS.
Yeah.
It's okay. Granted, that has a valid purpose, but really, what it is, it's a fucking Medicare mill. All this fucking Medicaid and insurance money is going into it for people that are gonna die, whereas the building could have been a community center and much better use. With minimal expense to taxpayers.
Yeah.
So it's a scam. It's just another Medicare scam, personally.
Here's kind of switching gears. Not switching gears a little bit.
No, I'm getting off. track.
No. Tell me about Antonio Pagan. And your,
oh God, how much tape do you have here? Your dad wants me to check the thing to make sure it keeps. It's the R. I don't see the dot. I see the REC.
Yeah, let's see.
But that means it's recording.
Let's see what it is.
Is it good?
Ouch. Yeah, we got like. I think we had another like half-hour tape, something like that. Yeah, we did.
That hurt. Antonio Pagan. How do I do this without taking too much time? He joined a group called BASTA, B-A-S-T-A. BASTA was created by a bunch of people who did not like the men's shelter on East 3rd Street between Bowery and 2nd Avenue. The men's shelter was being organized by political activists so that the men there could vote. They did not like, let's say certain people in that area did not want the homeless there to have a right to vote. They were considering them transient people with no permanent residence, even though that was their residence, and they didn't want them to have the right to vote because a voting block like that could actually upset the balance in the city council election. Antonio Pagan was sponsored by Wilbert Tatum, who was a publisher of the Amsterdam News, who owned several buildings on East 3rd Street between Bowery and 2nd Avenue, those old, really old 1830s buildings on the south side of 3rd Street between Bowery and 2nd Avenue, close to 2nd Avenue. So he was sponsored by Wilbur Tatum, who was tied with David Dinkins, who appointed Pagan to the community board. On the community board, Pagan was using his position and his sponsorship by these people behind the scenes to create something called the Tompkins Square Neighborhood Coalition, which is devoted singularly to getting rid of the homeless from Tompkins Square Park and the neighborhood, and also attacking squatters for stealing housing from the poor. Even though poverty pimps would hold these buildings and use taxpayer subsidies. First of all, they get the buildings for free from the city. They would get taxpayer dollars to renovate the buildings. Then they would get tenants given to them by Section 8, and they would pocket the fucking money themselves. And people trying to get into the buildings would have like years and years of a waiting list. Whereas the squatters would take a city-owned building with no expense to the taxpayers at the squatter's own expense, renovate and rehab the buildings, and house the people immediately with no waiting list. Which sounds like a better economic example to me, you know? So, but Pagan, that was Pagan's, so Pagan basically, by dividing, the neighborhood was kind of like us in a schizophrenic state of mind. You had people upset about the yuppie invasion, the rising cost of real estate and housing, and the displacement of long-term residents, and the very outspoken presence of squatters and homeless in the neighborhood. Right. Pagan used those legitimate concerns by long-term residents to divide the neighborhood against itself in order to get himself elected by running against Miriam Friedlander, who was the long-term city council member. And he basically divided the neighborhood against itself so that people would support him in a way to clean up the neighborhood. But the problem wasn't homelessness or squatters. They were the symptoms of the larger problem, which was the city's failed policy and also favoring the fucking real estate developers and the yuppies who wanted to come in here. They could have kept things zoned in such a way that real estate would never have gone up to unaffordable levels. But the city's plan was to change the demographics. That's why redlining ended, where banks would start making loans to yuppies who could buy buildings and renovate them and kick people out. It was a concerted plan to re-inflate the value of real estate in the Lower East Side. They let it bottom out. They bought it for pennies on the dollar. They started making loans to those people, the developers, to start real estate back on an upswing. It was a plan. It didn't just happen by accident. And Pagan, basically with support of real estate interests, was able to get into the city council. But it sucks to say that he only won that initial vote by 96 votes. If this 96 people had voted a little differently, Freelander would have stayed in, and then that was an interim election because they changed. I'm going all over the place here, but
I want to hear.
The city charter was redrawn every 10 years. It gets redrawn. In 1990, it got redrawn, and there was an interim election, which was like a instead of the usual 4 years, it was 2 years, and as a result, Pagan they had an early election. And this is my memory, I have to check my records to make sure I'm 100% accurate, but he won the vote by 96 votes, which was pretty disgusting. 2 years later, they had another election, and Freelander ran in earnest against him. This time, everybody pulled out the stops to go against him, and it was lost again. They did catch one cop misreporting the election totals at one precinct.
Oh, wow.
And they caught him because they were like watching him and watching the totals. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. He turned numbers around, but that didn't help the overall election, because then when they redrew the district, they included areas that had nothing to do with the Lower East Side, part of Murray Hill. You know, you can't, the whole gerrymander thing, you know, and it was bullshit. Really, what they should have done was make 14th Street, Bowery, and let's say Houston. That should be one district, because that's a district that's, you know, but they make it all like squiggly lines, and you know, and so people here have nothing to do with people here. They don't have the same interests or concerns or you know, conditions, but that's how it went. So she lost. So he was able, as a city council member, ultimately, to get onto, I forget what they call it at the city council, but it's the Land Disposition Committee, which is a plum thing for somebody who had a bunch of buildings that he was controlling in the Lower East Side through his Tompkins, his Lower East Side Coalition Housing Development, which is a poverty pimp group that he controlled. So here he was, as a city council member, disposing of city-owned properties to his real estate friends, while he himself had control of city-owned buildings before he got onto the city council under the Lower East Side Coalition Housing Development, where he would get free buildings, free money to fix the building, and free tenants with profit for himself. Conflict of interest? Yeah, I think so. And he was really tight with Giuliani, so when he ultimately lost the city council seat, Giuliani gave him a no-show job as employment commissioner, $250,000 a year. So, you know, that comes out, no, I'm sorry, $125,000 a year. So 4 years, that's $500,000 basically. So he ended up getting, when Giuliani was out, he lost, he really didn't, I don't know what happened to his real estate. I know he still got the, well, he had the real estate until he died suddenly a few years ago at the age of 50. The last time I saw him, he had a little head and this huge fat body. He looked like a Hershey's Kiss. He was horrible, and his face is beet red, and his nose is all bulbous, and he's like carrying all these beers. I'm like,
that's what happened. And
so he died at 50. So all that corruption, all that chicanery, what did it do? What good did it do him? But he did his role. He did play his role as his masters wished. He fucked up the neighborhood, facilitated and expedited gentrification of the neighborhood. And his friend Donald Kaposha is still doing it today. So
is there? This is kind of like a small thing, but my parents told me about someone threw a pie at a community board meeting.
Oh, that was Jerry Trudell who threw a birthday cake at.
They threw some crickets out too, right?
Well, there's two different stories. In the case of the community board, a friend of mine, Jerry, I forget what they were voting on now, but this guy Albert Fabosi was the head of Community Board 3 at the time, and he was at a meeting, and I forget what the item was. I wrote about it in the shadow. It's in the shadow, and by some miracle, I just caught the shot as the cake is touching the guy's face. That, you know, like splat. His face is contorted as he's feeling this gooey shit on his face, and I'm watching Jerry's got this box, and he's like ranting and raving, blah, 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 and he's still opening the box. I go, oh my God, he's gonna put that cake in that guy's face. I'm saying to myself, I had no idea he was gonna do it until I'm watching him. I'm like, take my camera, like, I want to get the shot, you know, and like he's just taking it out, and next thing I know, and they don't even see it coming, these oblivious morons, because they're so contemptuous of us. They weren't even listening to him, they're just writing, you know, like that's like, you know, they didn't have any little video games then, but they were just like doing, you know, just like ignoring him. So next thing you know, right in the face. That was a great one. But I can't remember what the agenda item was at the time, but I did put it in the shadow, so it's probably there. The thing with the crickets was the city was auctioning off buildings, and on the Lower East Side. Instead of giving the buildings to community groups that would do something with the buildings, they would auction them to the highest bidder, real estate developers. Again, further facilitating gentrification. It was all under Giuliani. And some people decided they wanted to disturb the meeting with roaches, cockroaches. They couldn't get cockroaches in bulk, but they could get crickets in bulk. So they just released a whole bunch of crickets. But it didn't really stop anything.
It's a good story.
It's just good theatrical thing.
I was reading this thing, The Villager, and Clayton Patterson, he said he videotaped part of the 1980 riot, and it said that it turned him into an activist. Like, did you, like, as far what I'm trying to say, I guess, is as far as the riot, how did you see, like, how would you compare before the riot and after the riot, the amount of people and, like, the passion in, like, Glory Sound?
I think it united the neighborhood like never before. I think people who were strangers were bonded were by this common experience. It was, it's funny, people I never knew, suddenly we were just friends, and we've been friends ever since. It's weird, like, I know people 25 years now because of the riot. And people you maybe never even said hello to. Now you're just, it's like you've had this common this bond from this common experience that you've experienced this adversity. You've been through this horrific event together, and you came out. You're still here because all those cops are gone. We're still here. We live in this fucking neighborhood, man. If you're transient, just like passing through like these Euro trash with all this fucking money, all these Asians with tons of fucking money from China, all these fucking yuppie money scumbags who live on trust funds. They're really transients. They're just here for the time. It's a fad. It's chic. Oh, it's boring out. Then they move on to the next thing. Or they have a house here, a house there, all over the fucking globe. They're just carpetbaggers. We are here for life. So that's the difference. But I think it really transformed the neighborhood. It really united people in a way we'd never been united before. Unfortunately, that didn't last forever. And how could it last forever? How could it last that long? Because people are still united in their own ways, but people do move on eventually. More yuppie scumbags move in. Demographics change. And you can't keep up the heat against police repression forever. We did a good job up to about 1992. So really, we kept the heat on from like, I'd say 88 to 92 for like 4 full fucking years. But you get burnt out. You can't do that forever. You got your own life. You got to start raising family. You have to work. You have to think about your own life. So I would say I don't know about Clayton personally, but I know that he, with his video camera, would confront undercover cops abusing people on the street. They had this thing called TNT, Tactical Narcotics Task Force, and they would just, if you were Hispanic or you're black and you looked a little whatever profile you met, they would just grab you, jack you against the wall and pat you down. They can't just do that, but they were doing that. So he'd run up with his camera and confront them. The cops didn't like him. So he would do that kind of stuff as a political activist. But the problem I had with Clayton, though, he tried to sell his riot footage for $1,500. Instead of making it available for people suing the police for the violence that happened to them, he tried to make money off of it. And when I finally saw his footage, it was him running 90% of the time with the camera on the fucking floor. The camera was aimed on the floor and bouncing all over the place. And you hear people, you're screaming, you're bang, bang, ah! Crazy shit, but no footage of it. Just the soundtrack. It makes a good soundtrack, but it wasn't a really good movie. Ultimately, it got edited. Ultimately, it got edited down to like something like
I think it was a version. I think it was his footage I saw. It was about like 2 minutes footage. Right? It wasn't like.
It probably comes down to that. Yeah, a couple minutes.
They kept cutting it.
But if you take the movie Captured, which is about Clayton and all his videotaping, they kind of made a nice little. Captured is a good documentary, and it's a good documentary about Clayton if you want to get a good idea about him. And I don't know if it's available on screen, but you can get a copy of it.
I'll try to find it.
It'll give you some details. But Clayton's not a bad guy, but he should have really just done what Paul did. Just get it out there, make the cops look as bad as possible. That's the damning evidence that, But, to his credit, he didn't want to give it up to the pigs. The pigs wanted it. And he's like, no, I'm not giving it to you. And they tried to put him in jail. So he just was like, okay, I'll go to jail. And the judge was like, well, we'll give you some more time to get it to us. But he was, I'm with him in court. He starts emptying his pockets on the table, giving his wife all his stuff. I'm ready to go to jail, Your Honor. And the judge didn't want to do it, So I admire Clayton for facing the scumbags down and not being intimidated. But he really should have just gotten it out there. Because videotapes weren't expensive back then. Okay, we're talking about the 80s. Things weren't as cheap as they are now in terms of videotapes and shit. But, I mean, what was a videotape back then? $2, $3? Come on, just get it out there, Anyway.
With
I don't want to keep talking too much, sorry.
No, I like him. Just a couple more questions.
You can have too much on your tape, though.
There was, I guess as far the overall issue, I guess you could say, with gentrification, and then it went to there's police brutality. Were there any kind of were different people kind of protesting specific different things throughout the riot, kind of? Like what were like the protesters?
You're talking about the night of the riot itself.
Yeah, or even before, after, what, like this, as far as the neighborhood itself, like what were they protesting?
It's really like, primarily it's protesting the imposition of an illegal curfew and a police army to enforce a non-existent curfew. That was the primary thing. That's what kept everyone in the street. It wasn't just squatters and anarchists and homeless in the street. Well, the homeless weren't with us.
I heard the homeless were kind of like on the side, just like.
Well, the thing is, the homeless, they had. I'm not gonna lose my train of thought, but the homeless had to deal with the cops basically. Which, look, you know, you can come into the park, you know, late at night and just sleep there, and then just get out by the morning. Yeah. That was the deal with the cops, you know, and so they didn't really want to fight the cops. They wanted a place to fucking sleep. Yeah. Some old, very old white homeless lady had a little shut cart, and she was trying to go to the park. She had no idea what the fuck was going on with this riot bullshit. She was trying to go to the park. It's midnight. She's trying to go to the park. So she goes, the cops beat the crap out of her with clubs. I couldn't believe my eyes. A little old lady was all like hunched over, and she's like maybe 75, 80 years old, and bang, bang, bang. How could you do that and go home to your fucking family? Hi, Daddy, what'd you do today at work? Well, I beat the piss out of an old homeless lady and stomped her into the ground. What kind of a psycho can do that and detach and disconnect and go home to his kids? How can he do that? Yeah. But they did. But that night, the primary issue was people uprising collectively against the imposition of that curfew. And it wasn't just the squatters, it wasn't just the anarchists, it was and not just the political activists, but it was regular people in the neighborhood. They didn't want a fucking curfew. Yeah. Now, some people didn't even know what the fuck was going on. They joined in the demonstration against the cops because they were like, why are all these cops here? What's going on here?
Yeah.
Well, they're beating people up. What the fuck? And then they started screaming, hey, you can't beat that lady up. So now people are becoming outraged. So
after that, did you kind of see like these people? Would it be fair to say that a lot of people kind of joined in the riot because of this brutality? After that, did they kind of like shift their gears from not just police brutality? They kind of start to notice
the large issues became
going on, like,
yes, exactly. So whereas the riot may have been X number of people like responding to the police rioting, the people like grew in size maybe double over the course of the 6 hours.
Okay,
But subsequently, you're right. Larger issues are now being addressed by people in the neighborhood who are now wised up.
Start noticing it.
Yeah, this is like gentrification. And this is fucking gentrification at the point of a gun or at the fucking at the end of a club. Now you have cops enforcing gentrification. It's one thing if the fucking yuppie scum is coming in because banks are enabling them to get loans where poor people can't get loans, and real estate developers are getting city connections to get large, gigantic chunks of land in the Lower East Side. That's one thing. But now it's the cops coming in to enforce it with force, and people are now getting wiser. Right. And I got wise. I didn't know what the fuck this was all about until then. Yeah. The 88 riot to me was a major wake-up call because I had no fucking clue what was going on. I didn't know what was going on before 88. Yeah. I just saw like the symptoms of it. I didn't know any of the causes. Yeah. What made the neighborhood become a bombed-out fucking rubble-strewn lot? I didn't know. And as a result of the 88 riot and as a result of starting the shadow in early 89, I started to find out my learning curve was a big curve. I started finding out myself as I started delving into the history, what came before the 88 riot. And then as I was living the events following the 88 riot and doing the shadow, I was really learning. For me, it's really been an amazing University of the Streets kind of experience. Yeah. Like a college experience, but by experiencing it. I had no idea until I started doing the shadow.
Yeah. That's when it all began, kind of.
I don't know, I'm talking a little too much here. Am I getting off track here?
No. Okay, trust me, this is great. It was, the time period I'm kind of focusing is from 88 to 91. So like
that was like the kind of peak of the street actions, the street riot actions.
How did it kind of change? Like once it how did it change from 88 to 91? Obviously, I guess you could kind of say it kind of increased. Just
I would say it's about the same from 88 to 91. Well, if your starting point is the 88 riot, I would say the last big demo / riot would be May 27th, 1991. Yeah. That was the Memorial Day riot.
Was that the closing of the park too?
The park closed shortly thereafter.
Yeah, right.
And they tried to say it was because of that riot they closed the park. But then we did some investigating because we're an investigative newspaper, not like the mainstream media morons who just regurgitate whatever the police tell them to regurgitate. We found out that there were pre-existing contracts signed a year earlier to close the park and to totally reconfigure and reconstruct the park to make it more policeable, removing trees, adding more lights, making it a more policeable park, and changing the demographics by removing people from the park who were there on a regular basis. And to a large extent that worked. Yeah. But that was a pre-existing deal. They needed the riot as an excuse to close the park to say, well, it's not because of this contract or making it more policeable. We need to make it more policeable because of this riot. Yeah. But the cops had to cause a riot as an excuse to close the park for a year,
Right.
to create a new policeable park, like Washington Square Park is policeable.
Right.
So there was a scam.
Right.
That particular riot, but that was the last big riot. So from 88 to 91, almost every other weekend was a major skirmish on the streets with the fucking pigs. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Everything from fires in the streets, bottles in the air, cops on fucking and riot formations. And the funny thing is, they were learning from us how to refine their riot control techniques. So one thing I kicked myself in the ass for is we unfortunately unwittingly trained them, helped to train them. We could have done better by, maybe little clusters of people changing positions or being unpredictable, or doing things in many locations at once instead of being bunched together. Fuck the pig! On Avenue A, where they had us completely corralled. We could have done it differently. But but it was what it was. I mean, none of us were professionals. We weren't like trained, and we weren't like skilled. We were learning, and we were just speaking from passion.
Yeah.
So we just
It's kind of like, I guess that's probably like the last question. But Neighbors obviously Neighbors gotten a lot more gentrified than it was back then. It's easy to say.
After the 91, after the park was closed, it really started setting the stage for a more investor-friendly atmosphere. The New York Times did articles about it, several articles about it. How since the park has been closed, and then after it reopened in, I think it was 92, after it reopened, it was a very different neighborhood in terms of the way New York Times is describing, where people felt safe to open that little yuppie restaurant. Before that, they would interview the owner. I was too afraid to invest here. I'm opening something because there's riots and people going crazy every weekend. But now it's quiet and I can do this. It's safe, And that was the whole key. Make it a safe, quiet neighborhood. So a yuppie business can come in to cater to the yuppie people living in that neighborhood. So yuppies would just live here to go slumming and go eat elsewhere. Now they can eat in their own gentrified neighborhood. So back to what you're saying, it was a much different atmosphere after 91.
Would you say that, like, as far as like the demonstrators, like, what do you think that like the neighborhood would have like either progressed, or like, do you think the neighborhood would progress differently if the demonstrators weren't doing what they're doing? Like,
I think gentrification would happen a lot faster, a lot more swiftly, on a grander scale.
So they definitely held it back. Like
we held it back for like 4 years, and I'm proud of that. But ultimately, we don't have millions and zillions of dollars to buy properties, and we don't have the city officials in our pockets to help zone areas to protect them from gentrifiers. The gentrifiers have the city in their pockets to zone so they can go as high as they want. And they got these gigantic fucking huge buildings that are out of scale with the neighborhood. The buildings in the same neighborhood are all this high. These developers have to go this high. They get variances. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. So we didn't have that kind of clout. We didn't have the police on our side. We didn't have fucking the city using zoning to our benefit, and we didn't have bank or money power. So ultimately, those elements with those assets or things at their disposal could, beat us. And we're still here, but the neighborhood is changing and has changed a lot. Yeah.
Well, do you think you kind of changed how the police operated too? You kind of almost like, or at least like.
Strangely enough, conversely enough, the police now are cooler than they were back then. The cops in the 80s, early 90s wanted to kick our fucking asses. It was some kind of like the Jets and the Sharks in West Side Story. Now the cops are cooler. I think they've changed their demographics. They've refined their style. They still got their Red Squad, their intelligence division. They got a CIA guy running that division for them. They got 1 million surveillance cameras now. But if you talk to like your regular average cop at the 9th precinct, they're not really out for blood like they were at that time. They're just cooler and mellow. It's a different mellow vibe. And every now and then I still run into cops from those days.
Yeah.
And it's like veterans of the Civil War used to get together like decades after the Civil War. I'm talking about northern veterans and southern veterans. And they would get together and they would hug each other. And they're like little old men with long hair and long beards. And they'd been through this common experience. Even though they were adversaries then, they were like respectful of each other now. And it's almost like that now with the cops. The cops from those old days, we got this respect with them. It's weird. And because in their hearts they knew we were right. They would tell me that back then. They quietly, look, I agree with what you're doing, but I can't, I got a job and I can't lose my job. I got a mortgage. I got to take care of my family. And my partner's going to think I'm not working with him if I tell you that, if I say that I support you guys. But, you're doing the right thing, but you just got to calm down, man. They would secretly tell us that they would support us. So it's a different police force now. Am I answering the question, or am I just going on? No. I'm sorry.
No, completely answer the question. That's it. But, I think that's
about it. You probably get more from the shadow than you will. Than the probably between this interview and the shadow, I think you'll probably get everything you need.
Yeah, no, I think I got.
Does your dad have a complete set of shadows? Because I'm missing a couple shadows from my collection.
He's definitely got a couple. I'll ask him probably later tonight. But
can I give you issue numbers and see if he's got them? Because
go ahead, let me ask him.
I need to know if how to find them.
Yeah.